Hello and welcome. My name is Trismegistus, and today I'm going to be doing some extra speculation about Friday Facts 401. So the reason for the extra video is this image, basically, when I was going through the edit and I was doing the silly thing where I was flicking between the two images, the old dunes and new dunes bit. Essentially I spotted that there was an extra bit on the picture that I hadn't originally seen. I didn't spot it while I was recording, but I saw it in the edit afterwards. And it's just this bottom corner here. I'll zoom right in, and as we can see, there's some little extra icons on the image there. They're obviously not in the old version, and they're in the new version. So if it wasn't obvious, this is clearly a set of icons from the expansion. I just popped it out on its own here as a separate image and zoomed in even further, and we can see we've got 5 buildings basically. There's clearly a little Easter egg for the expansion, and I didn't really spot it, as I say, until the edit, and the amount of recording I'd already done meant the video was going to be an hour and a half long, which is getting to the bounds of what I can edit in a single day. So I figured I'd do a separate video just talking about these. I think we can say fairly safely that 3 of these are known buildings. The top one appears to be the Centrifuge, the second one appears to be the Foundry, and the third one appears to be, the fourth one rather, in the order, appears to be the electromagnetic assembler. The other 2 buildings are not confirmed. However, given what we've seen in a previous Friday Facts, we can suspect that this final one is the sort of missing building. By missing building, all I mean is going back to Friday Facts 372, the one where the recap, we had this teaser image, and we saw that we have 3 buildings here: the Foundry, the electromagnetic assembler. I don't think that's what it's called, is it? But I cannot remember the name of it properly. And this green building here. If we look at this green building, we can see that it's got this sort of pipe arrangement on the front, and the sort of dome-ish thing here with a couple of windows in it. If we look at this building at the bottom here, I think we're fairly safe in saying that this is the same building. It's got this sort of pipe on the front, it's got a dome-ish thing on the top, and it's a sort of greenish colour. I suspect these are the icons in the game rather than, I don't think these are the images you get when you drop something on the floor. Those are usually basically the same, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think these are just icons that have been added on, so the icons in the game. This one is the Foundry, which is kind of the most indicative of that, because it's closer to the icon than the actual building itself. If we look at the actual image of the Foundry in-game, we can see it has similar design features, so that Y-shaped piping I mentioned during the video discussion, and the general picture of it is similar to this, but this is an icon representation, So for example, this pouring vessel on the side here is quite small in reality, but on here it's shown as very large because it's a key feature. The green building then we know has the windows and the pipe on it. Doesn't really clue us in as to what the function is. It does confirm, however, that this is the missing building or from this image, and that it is definitely in the game. It's not been forgotten about. We have another building, we'll come back to that one later. What I would say on these is that the order is interesting. We know that this is Nauvis, the first planet that we go to. We know that the way you approach the planets, the way you go to the planets, is that you go from Nauvis to 3 of the planets, 2 of which we know are Volcanus and Fulgora, so the lava planet, the hot lava planet, and the lightning planet, which is the oil planet basically. We know there's a 3rd planet that you go to is an intermediate step, and that the final planet is only reached by exploiting all 3 of those planets. We know that based on this image here. These have been updated. These were the placeholder images for the planets, but this was Volcanus, this is Fulgora, and this is the 3rd one that we don't know about. We also know that we are going then to another planet, but that planet is only then unlocked once you've completed, via the research for these 3 planets. So the one we are expecting to find out next is this one, which we suspect is called Bacchus because of a image unblurring that someone did on Reddit. We believe the final planet is called Aquillo and is potentially ice-based. That's what the name would suggest. And Bacchus we suspect is a vegetation type based planet. These are all speculations. We don't know, but there have been hints and clues, etc., etc. So we have on here, we've got the centrifuge as the Nauvis building. My specific speculation on this is that the centrifuge is exclusively locked to Nauvis. That's the only place you can unlock it, and there's a little subtlety that I think has not been kind of picked up maybe in the community, and I may be reading slightly too much into it. I don't know this to be the exact case, but I believe that the exclusive recipe buildings, or the exclusive recipes rather, which were revealed in the Factoriopedia, Friday Facts, it talked about having exclusive recipes. Now, my interpretation of that is that these are things that can only be made on this planet. I may well be wrong on that, but I believe you can only make these items on the planet, which is why they're described as exclusive recipes. If they were exclusive technologies, in other words, there were technologies you could only unlock on this planet, I think they would be called that. And we do know that there are going to be other technologies that you will unlock on Volcanus. And so I think these recipes are tied to the planet, that you can only build these things, as in manufacture them, on Volcanus. I think you can then move them anywhere else. So you can then, say, for example, take Greenbelt and move it to another planet and use it there. But I think the only planet you can build Greenbelt on is Volcanus. And this comes back to the idea that they don't want planets to be just outposts. They don't want you to just mine the stuff, bring it back to Nauvis and just build everything on Nauvis. They want you to build factories on the planets. And a way of doing that is to force you to have the manufacturing for certain things on the planet. Now, some of it's a little bit of a cheat, or one of them certainly is a little bit of a cheat in that, this sulfuric acid thing, I think uses the geysers and so could only be done on Volcanus because that's the only place you get geysers. And the others are just there to basically force you to use Volcanus as a manufacturing base. One of the things that's interesting with that is that means a science pack is exclusively locked to Volcanus. You can only make the actual science pack on Volcanus. I may well be wrong on that. It's just a speculation point, but it's based on the fact that it describes them as exclusive recipes rather than exclusive technologies, which would seem have been more what I think people were expecting. The basic point of that, though, is that we noticed that the foundry and the big mining drill are Volcanus exclusive recipes. What I therefore think is that the centrifuge is the exclusive recipe for Nauvis, that in theory you could unlock and manufacture, so any oil refinery, any chemical plant, assembly machine, those type of normal buildings can be manufactured on any planet, okay? But the centrifuge can only be manufactured on Nauvis. Now, the centrifuge's primary function is to process uranium, okay? In fact, I think that's its only usage. Which when you compare it to what the foundry does, what the electromagnetic machine, plant does, that would seem a bit odd that it's so exclusively locked to uranium. The reason for that is quite probably because I would suspect Nauvis is the only planet with uranium, and that uranium is used in the space science. Therefore, it's the only place to use uranium. Now, I think what this is actually kind of hinting at as well is that actually there is going to be some other use for the centrifuge, because the other buildings, if they are manufactured exclusively on the planet, part of the point of them is that actually they are useful to have elsewhere. So it's useful to have foundries on Nauvis. It's useful to have the electromagnetic plant on Volcanus. So there is a reason, a use for them to be used on other planets, which is primarily around the fact that they do other things, they're multi-recipe machines, and that they have this productivity bonus, okay? The centrifuge at the moment does not have the productivity bonus, so my suspicion is that it will acquire that productivity bonus, and you'll be able to get loads and loads of uranium. That would also make sense if it's, a science requirement, essentially, space science requirement. Giving us more uranium would kind of make sense, even though there is like oodles of uranium. I also suspect there've been hints, or I've perhaps over-interpreted as per usual, but there have been hints that maybe there's an extra type of nuclear coming. That could be a plutonium. The way reactors work on Earth is you can get them to basically produce plutonium. Plutonium is a sort of a more stable and more useful fuel, nuclear fuel, but also for weapons. So nuclear weapons are generally actually plutonium-based nowadays, rather than sort of uranium-based. And so that could be a hint that we're getting plutonium production. You can, when you reprocess your fuel, perhaps we also get plutonium out of it as well, and you can use plutonium to make sort of super nukes or something like that, to help you clear out the biters even more, or maybe they go into nuclear artillery or something like that. The other option there is that perhaps there's going to be nuclear fusion, an even more powerful version of nuclear power. As I say, I think there's something else going there. I also, if I'm honest, suspect that it may be used for something else. As I say, the other buildings all have like the ability to make intermediates. So I think maybe we'll get something, perhaps oil related, perhaps fluid related in some way. It is a centrifuge. You could make an argument, maybe you could use it for processing oil, a quicker way to separate oil, or maybe you could use it in coal liquefaction in some way. So those are sort of more wilder speculations, but I think perhaps, there might be that possibility. I certainly think it will acquire the productivity bonus of the other buildings. What that leaves us then is the green building. No real clue again as to what it could be for. However, the fact that it's last could hint that where I've been thinking it was maybe based on Bacchus, perhaps because it's last in the list, it's based on Aquillo, the final planet. We know, or we suspect, that final planet is ice-based and cold, so perhaps this is where we get the whole heating from. My suspicion on how it works is that if the foundry uses tungsten in its production, and it can process tungsten, and the electromagnetic machine uses and can process holmium to build it and to what it can process. So I suspect that's the tie-in for the 3 intermediate planets. The centrifuge then, I guess there could be some part of that we can only make on Nauvis. I don't know what that would be, because we know stone is available, because it uses stone, I think it uses concrete, doesn't it? We know that's going to be available on Volcanus, so maybe there isn't that exclusive tie-in in that way. But it suggests to me, or how I think it's going to work, is basically those individual planet buildings use the product that is exclusive to that planet in their manufacture, and they can process it. I think the final building brings all of those together. So whatever that exclusive manufacturer is on Aquillo, basically uses processed tungsten, processed holmium, processed whatever is on Bacchus, and sort of brings them together. And you have to bring all of those materials, and it could be the intermediate that they produce. We know there's like those supercapacitors and whatever the Tesla items are, tungsten carbide. Whatever you do, you need to bring all of those together in order to make that machine. The planet itself perhaps doesn't have an exclusive resource. I think it will. I think it will have something very special. But maybe it doesn't on itself. And in order to build that, you've got to make all your logistics, bring it to that building, that planet. And you can't do it on Nauvis because it's exclusively locked to that planet. And so, it uses all of those. Looking at the building then in that light, one of the things that's on here that we don't know about, and I think it's actually going to be on Fulgora, but this has glass on it. It has proper glass on it and proper glass panels. So I'm wondering if maybe glass is going to be a thing on Fulgora. I went with it not being, we're going through the speculation, but I think it might be something you can do. Or you can simply, you can turn sand into glass, basically, because it really does have a proper glass element to it, not just a tiny little window, but proper windows on it. What I did wonder is if this is a frozen planet, okay, when the tungsten carbide was revealed, because tungsten is actually used in lighting filaments and and heating, or it used to be in lighting elements, but it's used in heating, and that was one of the things I pointed out, as well as being used in weapons. But one of the things I pointed out was that it's used in heating elements. Could it be that whatever we do on Aquila is basically by melting something? So to gather the resource, to make it so it's not just mining yet another thing, the resource we need to gather is in liquid form. What it could therefore be, I don't know. I mean, it could be something like a liquid metal, it could be mercury or something like that. But what it can actually be, I don't know. It could be as simple as water. You could just be melting water to make water, and water's the really important resource there that you need for some reason. I mean, it could also, if you think about that, it then could tie into nuclear fusion, because you could be extracting heavy water, you see. But that's going really off beast. But basically, if you say the tungsten can be used in heating and Fulgora resource is used in supercapacitors, provide you with a way of having lots of power, basically, for heating. So could it be that whatever we are extracting on Aquila, on the ice planet, requires us to heat something up, and this is the heating building? So it's not so much that it's... it always looked to me like it was pumping something. It's got a big pipe on it, a big sucking, hoovering up type pipe, and that's one of the reasons I thought it might be bioorganic, because it's liquids and that sort of thing. But could it be it's much more literal than that? These have proven to be quite literal. This is a foundry, lava, liquid metals. This is a electromagnetic plant. Lightning is the theme on this planet. So this then is a pump to pump up liquid, and it's just much more literal than we've kind of anticipated. One of the things I would say with this is there is quite a lot of detail being hidden here. So, there are other things going on that we can't really tell. But say my suspicion now is that the final planet, being ice, you have to use heat, and the components you get from the other planets allow you to build this machine in order to melt something and either extract it or reveal it or something like that. And that is the mechanism for getting at it. So just to note, I messed up there because I realised just then that I've zoomed in the image on the background, and of course I'm over the top, because the image is on the left-hand side. So I'll botch it together in the edit. I'm not good at doing proper editing, but I'll overlay this on the thing. So apologies if complete change of visuals, basically. But these are the five buildings here. And the one that's kind of new is this one in the middle. Okay. My new suspicion is that this is the building on Bacchus. Previously, I thought this one on the end was the Bacchus building, the missing intermediate planet, as it were, or pending intermediate planet. As I say, I now think this one is the end building, and it ties into it being it heats something up, sucks it up, extracts it as a liquid. This is obviously Volcanus and Fulgora, so I think this must therefore be Bacchus. There's kind of no other planet left. It also, to me, and it's very difficult to tell from this tiny little icon, but to me it looks like it's some kind of fermentation thing. Bacchus, which, as I say, we suspect the planet's named after, we don't know, but Bacchus was the Roman god of agriculture, wine and fertility. And we have this thing about vines of grapes and these sorts of things. Obviously it's possible to read far too much into these names, but Bacchus, as I say, it's agriculture, wine and fertility. So that tends to suggest that, well, wine, you ferment wine, basically. In order for it to turn grapes into wine, you ferment it. And that's what I therefore think this machine is. I suspect, as I say, that this is a fermentation building. What you get out of it is therefore highly open to speculation. My wild guess is based on this tiny little icon of some planet that has, because we now know that is the new icon for Nauvis on the left there. We know that that's Volcanus, and we know that we have Fulgora and Bacchus to go, or it could link to. at the time as I was speculating, I don't know whether this represents the connections that you've made or the connections that are possible. But if we imagine that Volcanus must be the closest to the sun, and that perhaps Nauvis isn't going to be either second, third, or fourth closest to the sun, and then Aquila is going to be the furthest from the sun because it's the coldest. So we know those two are fixed points, and it would make some sense that the maximum distance you could travel is perhaps to the third planet from Volcanus, which is the first planet, and so you've got effectively an order then of planets, that you could go to. So Nauvis is actually second, Bacchus is third. We know that that's not Fulgora, so it must be this intermediate planet or the final one. And why would it be bright green if it's covered in ice? Not that we know it's covered in ice, but if we look on this here, the basic point is there is this weird colour of pink on this banding here. And as we know from, on the Volcanus one, we can see that it's got lava on it on the icon. When we saw the Fulgora planet icon, we saw this lightning in the dust storm, and we know it happens at night, so it's happening in the black. So it's a reasonable guess, I think, that this planet here with its pinkness, that pinkness is whatever it's going to be. It is also bright green and pink, so we know the colour of the grass on Nauvis is quite bright green, and yet it's depicted here as sort of orange, sort of yellowy, orangey, that type of shade. So we've got bright green and bright pink. Well, algae tends to be this bright green that algae that you're familiar with is this bright green colour. But it can also exist in all sorts of other colours, and one of those colours is pink. So this bright pink is another type of algae. So the suggestion for me is that whatever this building is, it's on Bacchus, it's used for fermentation, and what it ferments, or what it grows, is algae, basically. And what we make from that then is anyone's guess. However, what it is worth noting is that algae has been used recently on space stations for the production of food and oxygen, etc. So if my speculation from my wild speculation video is correct, that we're building a spaceship in order to get back home, a big one, proper one, not these platforms, and it's a real proper big spaceship, then although the engineer doesn't appear to need food, maybe that's what he's making. It's making oxygen and food in order for the engineer to survive, and that's why it's completely different, completely new, completely weird compared to what we normally do in Factorio. I don't actually think that's correct. I think it will be something different to that. You can, for example, algae you can use in oil and all sorts of things like that as well. So there's all sorts of uses for it, but it's just an interesting and sort of a wild speculation. And also they kind of demonstrated the new planets are very much focused on new mechanics, like properly new mechanics. A liquid processing of liquid metals and harnessing electricity in order to make Tesla items and superconductors, and possibly melting ice to extract something particularly valuable or useful. So perhaps what's going on in Bacchus is some whole new mechanic around bioorganics, biology, growing things, fermenting them, turning them into other types of products. My sort of more conservative suspicion is that it is oil related, basically, so that you do process it as a biological thing, but it produces some kind of extra oil product. We get more types of plastics or other types of oil related product, because we've seen new smelting things, we've seen new types of items, even though we don't know what they're for, in superconductors and all this sort of stuff. So something to do with oil would make some sort of sense. Something to do with a liquid processing, a liquid material that you process as part of an oil chain would kind of make sense. But it really is anyone's guess, I think. Looking at the building itself, to me it looks like it's got several sort of chambers on it. You've got something going on here on the left that's quite big. There's possibly a pipe of some description connecting to the top. You've then got sort of maybe two smaller chambers, or it's just one smaller chamber and another pipe going around the outside. It's also bright green. We know that this is a a green here, but that's the sort of efficiency type green. Whereas this appears to be a new green, a new brighter green. It's not quite the green of the nuclear, so I don't think it ties into that, but it could do. But it does feel more like an algae processing. I would also say this green isn't a million miles away from like this yellowy greeny type colour here, so it's not completely dissimilar to that colouring scheme, but it's also not that similar either. So yes, I think that's the extra building that we'll get on Bacchus, and I think it will be used in some kind of bio-type processing. My suspicion is this is a fermenter, and that it will process algae, which is the exclusive material available on Bacchus. I hope you enjoyed today's extra speculation video, and you might consider coming back for another one. I've been Trismegistus, this has been Factorio. Thanks for watching. Cheers.